Hey everybody, welcome back to Field Stories, and I guess welcome to 2025 for my actual participation in this podcast. Yeah, first time I've been on an episode this year. Good to see you again on the good old Riverside app, Michela. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I know it's been a minute since we've talked. I feel like you've been ghosting me on purpose.
Yeah, I think the last time, I mean, maybe did we do an episode in no, last time no, I don't know, like December. I can't even remember. It's been so long. It
Yeah,
felt yeah, so yeah, totally on purpose. I even had to go to another continent to try to avoid you,
just
get as
avoiding you. I
as
know.
far
I
as
get
away
it.
as I
It's
could.
fine.
Well, you
I
never
love
come down
it.
yeah, you never come down to see me or anyway, so turnabout is
Listen, I'm
perfect. There you
trying.
go.
I really
Yeah.
tried. It's we'll get into it of what's going on, but it's a little more difficult for me too right now. But
No.
would love to hear a little bit about your trip because I only saw pictures and honestly this is really our first time talking. So I'm excited to hear
Yeah.
about it, like an actual catch up with everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's so we might as well tell everybody tuning in and listening. I mean, that's kind of the plan for this episode. Rather than getting a guest, we just haven't spoken in so long that I feel like
Mhm.
we can just fill an episode chatting about what's happened in the last 3 months between, yeah, where I've been and the work I've been doing, and also some of the things happening in the world and how that may relate to conservation and sort of our perspectives in our field. So it's going to be a bit of a back and forth episode, I guess, Michaela. But I think it'll be really interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess to start it off, how the year's been for me so far. It's been a roller coaster. I've been in three continents, doing really important work in all three, in my opinion. I mean, I guess obviously the beginning of the year was very important meetings with one of the NGOs that I work with, which is Wilderness International, and these are the annual meetings where we plan all the conservation activities here in Peru and also in Western Canada. So super important, meetings for us. But then from there, yeah, it's literally wrapped up the meetings on the morning of the 20th and took a train that lunchtime and was in Uganda about 20 hours later. Yeah, went to Uganda for the second time for our second research expedition, and it was really amazing. I mean, obviously, it's the second time we've been in that country, and this time we decided to go into the northeastern part of the country because the last time we went sort of the west and the central parts more, and we went into the northeastern part. And for anybody who doesn't really know that much about Uganda, obviously it's a country that's had historically some pretty serious issues with civil war and internal conflicts, as have a lot of countries across Africa, of course. It's been relatively stable now, pretty much for the last say 20 years or more, which is good. But nonetheless, the lingering effects of that civil and instability are still there. The scars are still there again, as they are in so many countries. And a little history lesson, and I don't pretend to be a history expert of Uganda, so take whatever I say with a grain of salt. But essentially, when Idi Amin's army was ruling the country, he basically didn't feed his army. He basically just said, "Listen, there's animals, eat them." So that's one of the reasons why there's very little wildlife left in the country that isn't in protected areas. Um, and this means that a lot of the country is kind of devoid of wildlife outside of some birds and bats, but large mammals are only really in national parks. But it also had a trickle down effect to everything in the country, including social development, economic development, infrastructure, etc. And it also really resulted, the combination of colonialism from England and also what happened to the Civil War resulted in a lot of areas being just kind of left behind and abandoned. And that is particularly the case for the northeastern part of Uganda. As you're driving up there, there's literally a point where it's just like, that's it. And there is no more paved roads for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers because it just kind of disappears and falls off the map. And there are a few small cities, and there's a lot of really, really basic villages that, like, there is no running water, there is no power, there is nothing. And that's really what's up there in many, many, many areas. And this is the area we wanted to go to because it's so understudied. And when we were discussing our very first trip, we said, like, we really want to go to a country and have a value to science and an impact to science, not just go for fun. We want to really make it mean something. So we discussed it with local researchers from universities, et cetera, in Uganda, and pretty much to a person, they all said northeastern Uganda. If you can get there, that's going to be a great place. So yeah, that's where we went. We went to four different sites in that region, and Yeah, I mean, it basically lived up to everything we were told. I guess some really interesting takeaways without giving away all the results because we're still compiling those with genetics, if you know what I mean. And also, we might have
Mhm.
some very exciting results over the next year through publications. But essentially, we did have some first records in the country for nearly 60 years in bats. We may have some new species to science. I don't know how many. I can't confirm, but there's a decent chance of that. Um, we just expanded ranges for bats that by hundreds of kilometers, like the equivalent of having um, a record in northern Florida and finding it for the first time in Minnesota. It's like crazy expansion of
Wow.
ranges where it's like, what the heck?
Hmm.
So it just shows you how little research had been done there and the value of our trip there. And, even from a bird perspective, obviously with birds, there is more data related to what's there, like, okay, it's there. But in terms of knowing anything about their life history in terms of breeding and particularly molting, when I went to Uganda for the first time, I mean, it was basically a bird in my hand. I'm like, what is this? Like, I know the species. I have no idea what age it is. I don't know what it's doing. I don't know anything about the molt strategy. I'm not going to go down that whole road, but we had Holly on in the past to talk about molting, and it's very complicated. So basically, we had no idea because there's no guide. But now,
Hmm.
after the first trip and this trip, we've captured around 1,700 birds in Uganda now, and we're starting to finally put the puzzle together. It's coming into focus a bit. Yeah, it was nice by the end of the trip with birds to be able to catch a bird and be like, yeah, it's this. I'm pretty sure done. We know now, so it's getting there. So really super successful from a research perspective. And then also, from the capacity building perspective, when we went there to Uganda the first time, we had quite a few Ugandan conservationists join us, and one in particular had a real strong interest in birds. So we decided to bring him with us the whole time. And then in this return trip, we said, hey, if you want to join us again, we want you to come back and help. And when he joined us the very first time, he'd never taken a bird out of the net. He'd held them a couple times, and that's about it. And now, like, we brought him back, and he was basically just taking birds out of nets, banding them, like, no problem. And
Yeah.
it's really rewarding to see that knowledge being shared, and it's a
Hmm.
start, and we hope to expand on that more in the future. So, I mean, those were all the really positive takeaways from it. Um, but the thing that I think was also interesting is the amount of burning in the country is just crazy. There's so much burning that occurs in the dry season there. It's almost like an obsession. Some of it is for agriculture, but
Hmm.
there are days where it feels like it's almost occurring just for the sake of occurring. I don't know how to say it. Like, I've spoken to a few people in the area, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't even know sometimes why they burn so much. It's almost unnecessary." But that
Huh.
ends up being that all the vegetation, the grasses in particular, in some areas just disappear, and you can imagine that has pretty serious impacts on wildlife. And surprisingly, there has been, I don't want to say zero research, but like less than you would imagine actual research on the impact of that on small vertebrates, such as birds, bats a bit, rodents, reptiles, etc. So,
Hmm.
you know, I, overall, the trip's amazing, super successful. We can't wait to return to Uganda in the future and other African countries. But also, it really highlights, wow, there's just so much we don't know
Right.
in that country and that continent. So that's kind of my overall summary and takeaway from that 5 weeks of my life and of this year for sure.
That's crazy. That I didn't even realize that there's different molting patterns in different areas too, and you were so in the dark because of the lack of research. So I'm really excited to hear about it. But was there anything significant that you can share with a specific species?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when it comes to molting in particular, it's like very, very niche and very nerdy, very much understanding
Mhm.
what it is. The thing about it is that, yeah, I wouldn't say there's anything I can share that's going to like pop. Like, if I could tell you that we've learned that cysticolas normally have a complete preformative molt, I could say that, but like, I would take a really, really niche person to know what that means. But, I think what was interesting that we saw was that we did 3 sites that were right on the sort of foothills of the Great African Rift Valley, right on the border between Kenya and Uganda, and we were between about 1,600 and 2,000 meters in those sites, so pretty high up in the foothills. Um, and in those areas, we didn't really get a single bird that showed any signs of breeding at all, which wasn't a shock. It was just like, okay, they're not breeding. But then the interesting thing is the final site that we went to, which was really near the border of Sudan, South Sudan. Um, we got multiple birds that were breeding of the same species. And the thing is, we were less than 100 kilometers away from the mountains. So,
Huh.
so it really shows you that, again, how local things can be. Now, does that mean that the birds in
Right.
the mountains finish breeding, or it means they're going to start breeding? We don't know. I mean, that's the thing. It's a short period of time we're there. We're not doing it every day. That's the potential
Hmm.
downside of it. But even that shows you how local it can be. And I mean, one of the things that we're excited to see is, especially if we return to other regions of Uganda, and in the future we probably will be going to other countries in Africa, is to see, if we have a species we caught in Uganda, and then I don't know, let's say we go to Namibia or I don't know Tanzania, whatever, we go to another country, to actually see like what is the extent of the molt. So how many feathers do they replace when they're molting in one region versus the other? How is it related to climate, such as rainfall, photo period, potentially migration, et cetera, depending on the
Hmm.
species. There's just so much there. Birds, like birds, I think are something that is harder to give like one single result from. I think the bats are easier because you have species that are just like, oh my God, I can't believe this is in my hand. It's like, what
Right.
the heck's
Right.
happening, right? And it's very easy to just sort of like look at a map and look at the bat and say, oh my God. Whereas birds, it's a much slower grind to get there. But it also is super rewarding when you have this bird in your hand and you feel like you're finally starting to understand what it's doing. Because like we spoke to with Holly last year, they can't tell you, they don't know, and you have to put this puzzle together, and it's really fun. So for both taxa, they're different, but they're also like super rewarding to sort of start seeing things come together. Yeah, it was very, very cool.
Yeah. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit, just like on like a day to day basis, what it looks like out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I mean, it's pretty intense for us. I mean, we do we every trip might be a bit different, but in general, we try to move pretty quickly through sites. So we were doing full research days at each site.
Hmm.
So so basically 32 research days, and then the travel days are full days of travel. And yeah, a day is yeah, it gets light there at around 6:30 a.m.
Hmm.
And then it gets dark at around 7 p.m. So it's basically 12:12. And yeah, we're opening our nets at like 6:15, 6:20, something like that, for birds, and we're staying open
Hmm.
till like 11 or 12 at 12 p.m., like almost to lunch. And then yeah, a little bit of lunch break, and then we go out and start setting up the bat nets around 4 o'clock, and then maybe if we're lucky we have dinner, and then we're back out to do bats at 7 until anywhere between 11:30 to 1 a.m. and then starting the whole day again. And it's pretty intense because the birds can have we had a couple of days that were quiet, and those were mostly related to the burning and the lack of habitat, in
Hmm.
my opinion. But
Right.
we also had, when we were busy, oh my God, we were like 40 to 60 birds in a day, which is a lot to handle.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, it's a lot of data we take, because it isn't just, I mean, for anyone listening who's maybe gone volunteering or ringing at like a migration station in North America or Europe, you might have 1,000 birds in a day. And the difference between 1,000 and 60 is, well, first of all, most migration stations will have multiple ringers so they can process it at the same time. But also for those situations, you're usually catching the bird. You take the wing, the tail, the weight. You look at the age really quick, and you have a guide that's very detailed. And then you're like, okay, done, 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 done. And you're doing birds in like 1 minute, 2 minutes, and they're done. In Uganda, we are looking so carefully for molting, for aging, for breeding, so many measurements because there's so little known. So bird
Mhm.
processing takes a lot longer there. So yeah, if you get 60 birds in the morning, it's a hectic morning, but rewarding, but hectic. And then bats as well. Like my co-coordinator on the trip, Ivana, she's an absolute legend. I remember when we worked together for the first time. I knew I was going to enjoy working with her when I walked up to her to net and I said, "Do you have anything?" She's like, "No, the little LBBs avoided the net." And I was like, "What do you mean LBB?" She's like, "Little brown bastards." And it sounds horrible, but you could say little brown bat, but trust me, after
Mhm.
a while, you do kind of use the other B word because
Mhm.
they are just so hard to identify. It's unreal. It's so difficult. You're talking about like about 10 species that weigh around 4 grams. The only difference is like 1/10 of a millimeter teeth size that you're looking at. It's ridiculous. You have the
Wow.
tiniest little, like actual jeweler goggles, looking in the teeth at angles like, yeah, I see it. It's crazy, but it's also super fun. But you're trying to do this sometimes at like 11:45 at night, and you've been working all day, and this bat's squeaking in your hand, and you're like, what is it? But it's fun. I mean, it's absolutely
Yeah.
incredible. It's super intense, super fun. So, yeah, the days are really intense, but amazing. I mean, I think the whole team is like, and the thing is, teams really, everybody finds a niche there. Some people do birds more, some people do bats more.
Hmm.
Really, really great team, and we had some incredible volunteers this time. I mean, Ivana obviously co-coordinating with me, along with my best friend Patty, who came. And actually, we brought Christian Mancello, who's an Ecuadorian bird ringer. We brought him over to help, and then we had a whole bunch of other volunteers that were like amazing. So the team was absolutely incredible. I couldn't be more proud of the team. We also had amazing collaboration from MacLeod University in Uganda. Dr. Sadiq joined us the whole time, and yeah, it was amazing. So couldn't really be any more proud and satisfied with this trip if I tried. I can't think of it really going that much better.
Yeah.
Really, really awesome.
Did you encounter any locals, and what did they know what you were doing, and how was those interactions in that area?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I mean, the whole trip was with a local NGO, a
Hmm.
local called Karatunga Foundation, and Karatunga's goal is to basically promote conservation through ecotourism and research in local communities. So we collaborated with them at one site, the first visit to Uganda, and then after that success, we decided, hey, you have connections in the Northeast. Let's work together again. So we worked with them. So we were always working with them and their team of people from that northeastern area. In
Okay.
addition to that, we did obviously in various times have local rangers that were there to protect us from the wildlife, but also from potential people, because there is still some danger from both Sudan and Kenya and people raiding and coming over. So we have to have rangers around us in many of the sites for protection. And then, of course, going into towns, going to communities. So lots of that interaction.
Hmm.
And then I guess there was one particular interaction which I really stands out to me is we had a driver who took our team from one side to the other, and he was very nice, very good driver. So I said, hey, can I get your number? I want to keep in touch with you. And then we decided on the very last morning to reward everybody and say, you know what, let's do a short little safari into the national park on the border of Sudan, so we can see some elephants and giraffes and enjoy that park. So it was great. Everybody loved it. Amazing. But we actually hired this driver to go in, and we had two trucks, and I went in the truck he was driving, and we got talking and the whole morning, and yeah, it was a really interesting and amazing conversation. He's actually Kenyan, but he works in Uganda. He kind of goes back and forth a lot, and he's helping his own small NGO, trying to really engage communities as well, and teach them about the value of protecting their wildlife. And he told me a really interesting story. He said that so when the English government controlled Uganda, they established this Kadepo National Park, and by that, I mean, they just took this area and said, now it's a national park, period. And this forced out all the local indigenous people who had migrated down from northeastern Africa, Egypt, etc., had come down, and they were living a relatively basic life there, but that was their sort of traditional life. And when the government came in, they just said, that's it, get out. This is our land now. So, of course, you can imagine those people had very little food, very little resources. People died, people starved. It was really horrible. And the government was like, not my problem. It's our
Hmm.
land. Classic colonial thinking in the 50s and 60s, right? I mean, we know the
Hmm.
history. So anyways, the reverberations of this continue, because what's happened is those communities have settled throughout the mountains, including the areas we were in. And their mindset now is still that the animals are not theirs, the animals are the government's. Because now there's a Ugandan wildlife authority, which is the Ugandan Ministry of Environment, basically, which manages wildlife. And because of their distrust for institution in general, which was built during this colonialism, they still see this, that it's not our wildlife, it's their wildlife. So we don't care if we kill it and eat it. It doesn't matter. It's not ours anyway, so we don't care. And it kind of makes sense, if you had everything taken from
Yeah.
you in that way, you're just like, you grow up as a culture thinking it's competitive. You have to fight for wherever you get. It doesn't matter. It's survival, right? Instead of thinking long term, you think in that way because you saw what happened if you don't. And his this Kenyan driver whose work lives in Uganda and works in both, he was saying that one of his goals is to try and teach people that it's not like that anymore, and that these animals, A, they have a right to live, period, and B, they're yours as well. Like, you need to try to conserve them, and this is the value of conserving them for ecotourism, for ecosystem services, for et cetera, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. And also burning, like trying to say, like, there's alternatives to burning. Can we do it more limit, like less of it? Can we do it more controlled, and not getting out of control? Because we had one night at one of the sites where we almost had to evacuate due to the fires. They
Oh my
almost we were staying in a school, and I don't want to be too dramatic, but we had a couple people who were really afraid of fires, including one assistant coordinator who from California, and she's used to forest fires, to be honest.
yeah,
And she was
right.
very, very, very nervous because she's seen these fires like this and the whole sky being a lot with fire, and it almost came under our school, and we had to like get people ready for evacuation. So the point is, these fires can easily get out of control, and
Mhm.
you know this Kenyan that I was speaking to, he was like, "This is really what our goal is to try to have this grassroots change and slowly, get this community to understand their place in the environment." So that was a really interesting interaction. He also really enjoyed speaking to me because he told me a story about family member who had moved to Europe, and when he moved to Europe, his whole perspective changed. The way he felt about family, the way he felt about people, and I said to this driver that, in my opinion, you know, not to go to this whole like family first stuff, which is an issue sometimes in the United States. That's the other extreme. But
Yeah.
we know that, you know what I mean. But we also know that sometimes, I think the way the Western culture views itself individually can have impacts on the environment and all of us, because we don't think of the collective, we think purely of ourselves and nothing else. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, it's the total opposite in a lot of, global South countries, or South America, Africa, Asia.
Mhm.
And I was speaking to him about that, and he was like, that's so interesting, because he saw that in his family member, how it changed when he was exposed to Western culture. And
Oh,
it was really a super interesting conversation. And he told me at the end
yeah.
of it, he's like, I've never really spoken to a foreigner who's been as honest about everything as you have, and he really appreciated it. So we really connected and had a great conversation for like 3 hours, and we still keep in touch on WhatsApp to this day. So yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I have said about going to Uganda, is that I've been really impressed by the people there and how nice they are, and the ones that are involved in conservation and committed to it are,
Mhm.
they seem to be incredibly genuinely committed to it and sacrifice a lot in their life to stick to it. And it's really, me personally, Michela, you know who I am, and I'm not one of these sappy, hearts flowing kind of people. But I still have a heart, and I can be really inspired by people sometimes. And I feel like a lot of the people that I've met in Uganda um, are really inspiring and really, really make you have hope, even in spite of everything that's happening in the world these days. You still can have hope, and you meet people like that. So yeah, that
Yeah.
was a really great takeaway for sure.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful story. I'm thank you so much for sharing. Just because I think that when you're talking about Western culture, there's also a stigma of the way that we look at Africa and African, civilizations and tribes, and there's just you know, I don't think there is a positive light in terms of how they view conservation or even just traveling there. And I think it's so important to have stories like yours where you're there, you're feeling safe. They're just other people that care, but they grew up, but their
Yeah.
cultures are different. The way that their societies were torn apart and raised back up and gentrified is so different. And so, and that's what makes people who they are, and cultures how they are, today. And so to gain insight on that, but also be respectful and then share your insight on your perspective of the world, in the Western world, and to find commonality of we care about the environment. We're changing. We want other people to change in a positive way, and of course it's going to be extremely inspirational because why wouldn't it be? I think it's to me it it is like a light in the dark, especially when you have people that are oppressed for so long, and so they're so jaded, and then you still see people trying their best to educate and to enlighten them, and realize like, hey, we can do things differently. That's it is exciting because
Yeah.
here we're in a world too, in our world, where there's so much disinformation that it's hard to get people on board. But to see someone else doing that is incredible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it is really inspiring, and you make a good point about the so much of what they do, and I even hate saying the term they, but you know what I mean. People in these parts of the world with less financial resources, so much of what is occurring there at conservation level is it is just amazing what they're able to accomplish and try to accomplish with resources that is such like one
Mm-hmm.
millionth of what we have in Western cultures, you know. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely inspiring. It's definitely there's so much work to do there. There's a lot of problems. It's not perfect. There's a lot of ground to make up. It's amazing how much impact humans as a species have in areas that are completely undeveloped. Like it's actually like there's no power, there's no water, there's trails you can barely drive a vehicle through, and yet it's like wow, this is all dominated by anthropogenic impact, and it's like you just don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, like it really. And I guess the final thing I would say that hit me every time I go to Africa, or Uganda, and Africa in general, that hits me is it really reminds me how we not only do we need to try to help that continent save what it has and improve what it has in terms of conservation areas and green spaces, etc. But man, we also really have to try to save areas that are still intact. And because when I look at the Amazon and it's so fragmented in so many ways, but there is still so much intact compared to Africa. And I feel like, man, I couldn't imagine a world where the Amazon was as fragmented as Africa is. And we need to really, that's my takeaway when I go there and I see how it's pockets of good habitat and the rest is basically destroyed in so many parts of the continent. And
Mm-hmm.
then, you come back here and of course, where I am standing is at the edge of an area that was destroyed and we've worked to stop it. But still, in general, there's still so much more Amazonian habitat intact. But if we don't continue to act, it's just not going to be the case. And then we're really won't be the same world we know now if that happens. So yeah, that's kind of the good news, but also the motivation to protect it news, because we can't let what happened to Africa and many Asian islands and nations happen to
Mm-hmm.
the Amazon any more than it already has, or we are going to be we're going to be screwed, and so is nature basically. So yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But at the same time, nature has its way of bouncing back too. And I don't want to end this on such a depressing note in this
No, no.
conversation, just because it's so easy to get down, especially with
Hmm.
everything going on.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that we're screwed. I think that things will be different, and I think that it will be more difficult. However, I think that we have the power to change these things and
Hmm.
to preserve, and it's just continuously educating, it's talking about it or speaking on it, it's just fighting for what's right. But I do believe that nature, I went to a field site today, and we have a couple of golf courses that we're restoring. And the more I learn about golf courses, they're absolutely horrible. They
Hmm.
just absolutely destroy the entire environment, and they just make this one little monotonous
Yeah.
field of fill and green grass, and that's it.
Hmm.
And so we're looking to the side of this environment, and these beavers keep just pushing in water. They're damming up all these channels that these golf whoever owned it made. And then suddenly this white cedar swamp that was torn down before is regrowing back. It's encroaching into this I don't know, the driving field or whatever that's called. And I mean, and it shouldn't be, because of the amount of fill that is in there, the amount of just monotonous vegetation, and it's still ending up like slowly encroaching into this area, which we want to, because it used to be a wetland, it used to be a part
Yeah.
of that. And so we're seeing that already without us doing anything. The golfers are still there. So little things like that does give me hope, knowing that nature bounces back in weird
Yeah.
ways.
No, I totally agree, and I feel like what I said is more motivation that there's so much left to protect. Not that we're not going to
For
be able to,
sure.
but more that there's so much
No.
is to protect. So yeah, and you're
Yeah.
totally right. I mean, nature is very resilient. So we shouldn't, and I mean, we should never give up. Absolutely, there's lots of hope and lots of, but we just need to. I just would never want to see a situation where an area like the Amazon becomes as fragmented as Africa. So, but there's
I
still lots of
completely
time. We
agree.
just need to keep
Mhm.
moving toward making sure it doesn't happen. It's basically the takeaway.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, obviously that's a long time, but I do want to just address quickly. Yeah, another thing that popped up while I was there in Uganda, which maybe you can elaborate a little bit of the situation in the United States. We obviously there when I was gone, you did an episode about the impact of the Trump administration's cuts across everything and the impact that's having on careers and jobs, and of course it's having a knock-on effect on the environment as well. But one thing that I noticed and I thought I'd bring up too, just to discuss it, is obviously the administration has slashed not 100%, but I don't know the number. It's in the 80s, I believe, of the funding for U.S. aid. And I think that maybe a lot of Americans may not necessarily know, and maybe a lot of people in the whole world, not just Americans, may not really know U.S. aid and may not know the impact it has across the whole world. And it has a huge impact on human health services, things related to AIDS, things related to other diseases, just insane impact there. And I, someone who's a doctor or that kind of like a more of a, human health could speak more about that. But I mean, it also has a really big impact on conservation and development of conservation initiatives. And, I know here in Peru, it's a massive funder of many large scale projects that could never get off the ground without hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars coming in. And even in Uganda, the same situation. There are so many projects and that are occurring and really relying on that annual funding from USAID. And literally, the NGO we were working with is partially funded by USAID, and they've lost that now. And speaking about the driver that I was talking to in Kenya, he also said to me that his NGO had gotten some funding from USAID, and he told me they've already had to lay people off because they lost the funding already. And I guess it's like, when you hear these cuts, these numbers, further to the episode you did, it impacts people's lives directly when they don't have a job, they don't have income, they don't have work, both financially and even like mentally. It's such a huge blow. But also it has impacts on the people who are getting these services from the government in case of USAID. I wondered, I mean, this is a huge topic. I know we could probably do an hour on this, but maybe quickly we could just address, since we have this catch up between us, from your perspective, what you think the conservation ramifications over and above the human ramifications, but the conservation ramifications are going to potentially be with all of these cuts occurring. Like what do you foresee happening? No one can predict the future, but what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know that's such a loaded question. Well, as you know, there was a mass firing of the federal workers. A lot of them got rehired, and but we don't know for how long they're going to be reinstated for. But I think, I don't remember the numbers, but it was over. There was thousands of workers. Yeah. And the thing is that with the federal freezings, we're seeing main offices that all these people go to are being closed down. So they're being forced to go to different offices. But because of that, there is also going to be either 20, 30, or 40% cuts of, for instance, fish and wildlife. And so a lot of these cuts are in these newer programs, such as review and permits, sectors that will kind of overlook like funding and grant applications. And we are losing grants now. And it's a trickle down effect too. So it's not just federal workers, it's now state workers, including myself. I don't know if I'm going to actually have a job in the next month because I'm mainly federally funded. Fingers crossed. I know that they're working really hard on it. But it's kind of out of a lot of people's control right now, because a lot of the federal funds that we acquire for especially endangered species, they're rolling back. They're rolling back a lot of regulations on the Endangered Species Act, or they're attempting to. They rolled back dozens of regulations for our clean water, for our EPA regulations, which people don't understand the severity of that. Along with that, firing NOAA, a lot of NOAA employees, which is where we get a lot of our climate data. But when, people get so up in arms of climate, but it's really like 10-day forecast, simple things like that. Yeah. Or, hey, maybe you don't want to, swim in the lake down the street because there's a huge E. coli outbreak. Who else takes care of that? And who else samples those water, that water quality to help you and make sure that your kids don't die? Because it is a huge thing. And then now especially for new grants that are coming out, so they got rid of NIH, or they really cut down on NIH, which is a lot of where our funding comes from as well. And so now there are key words that you can no longer use. So that includes woman, woman, diversity, Black, Native American, Indigenous, diversity, which, you know, if I'm using biodiversity, I can't any longer. Can't use female, but I can use male. I can use male. You know, and so it's just truly, I mean, it's just playing out like we all thought, this oligarchy that we are living, and it is having absolutely detrimental effects that the people who voted for this are not even, you know, truly coming to terms with until it affects them. So they really do not. And I found, because unfortunately I have people who I love very dearly who are very close to me, but they don't, you know, it doesn't affect them. And so even though it affects me, you know, someone that they love, and I know that they feel bad, and I warn them that this would happen, it doesn't matter because it doesn't affect them. And it's unfortunately, like you said, you know, kind of tying back to how Western civilization is very selfish. We're very selfish creatures by nature, you know, throughout history, this Western civilization. And because of that, we're really seeing it more and more. And then along with social media, there's just such a push for distraction. I mean, the fact that the White House had posted a ASMR video of people being chained up and sent to Guantanamo Bay. I don't care if they came in, you know, illegal or not. That is so inhumane. It's so immoral and disgusting. So unprofessional to be posted on the White House page. We also have. We had this video of Trump and Elon, like this AI video of them taking over Gaza. While in the meantime, they're just continuously rolling back. Now we're also taking over the national parks. And now companies are able to bid and take down forests because we no longer have treaties. We're taxing the hell out and tariffing the hell out of Canada. So now, you know, we're going to be getting our wood from our own areas where, you know, whereas like this past year has been the warmest year on record. This year most likely will be. We've been having the most insane weather. It's, you know, and it's just unfortunately because these trigger words of climate change, environment, like, you know, the way that this, our quote unquote leader speaks of people who are in the environmental sector and field is as if we are crazy. And he called us loons. And so, you know, all it is setting this precedent of people who are either not educated, not aware, or just terrible people, really, to follow and go, yeah, you're right, they are crazy. You know, climate change isn't a thing. They really just want to take our money because it becomes some political agenda when it's really, we're really trying to, you know, when you say you care for our younger generation, they don't. They do not care. And, you know, it's very frustrating. It's a whole, you know, and then the last thing too for our field is that with these firings, you know, it's already an oversaturated field. But when we're applying for jobs now with all these other extremely qualified people, you're not going to get a job. It's very, very unlikely you're going to hear back. Even for myself, you know, I've been applying and not hearing back for things I know I'm extremely qualified for. And it's just, we're just losing money. Even for PhDs, for myself, for instance, I've been reaching out to professors saying, hey, you know, I have this idea. And they're like, well, we did have money, but we no longer. I know people who were already going to be funded and then it was rescinded. You know, their start dates, multiple people who were supposed to start a program. I know other people who their masters are being funded, then it may be rescinded. It's, you know, the environmental sector makes up what 5% of the budget in the federal budget. It's not about the money. It's about getting control of the land so that we can produce our own resources. It's about control, and it's about, unfortunately, honestly, the white male fragility of, you know, the fact that we can't say women, diversity, Black, Native American, Indigenous, whatever it is, because that, you know, I think that they've been so uncomfortable adapting to inclusivity that now that they don't want anymore. And so we just have a whole bunch of toddlers in the office just tearing this down. And it's just, and I'm the way I'm speaking, I'm not representing my program, by the way, and or who I work for. I'm just speaking as an individual outside of work. But it's, you know, it's so detrimental, and it's going to be very detrimental to our climate and our environment. And the fact that it's not even been a year is very concerning, but it's tearing down people's mental health. People are going to be jobless. Here our economy is absolutely crashing already. The stock market's crashing, and then other people in the because again this selfish mentality of oh, it's only affecting certain people. It's affecting people outside of our country too.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
it's horrendous. It's so horrendous. I wake up every day wondering, am I living in a reality? This has to be a dream. This is a joke. Because there is a difference between Republicans now versus Republicans 5, 10 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And it's not the same. It's not,
Not the same.
oh,
Yeah.
Republican versus Democrat. It's
Mhm.
oligarchy, two people who are absolutely destroying everything, and then who are destroying everything, not just the Democrats but everything. And that's what people I think are slowly starting to see, is that this is not what I voted for. Oh, it's affecting me now. I'm regretting my vote. And no one's doing anything, and they're saying they're doing things, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are angry. We're seeing some pushback, which is good, but I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah. No, everything you say, I agree with. And I mean, I think also maybe you made a really valid point that the environmental sector, conservation sector is, yeah, roughly 5% of the budget, which is nothing
Mhm.
in the scheme of things. But I think that it gets a lot of attention, like immigration does, and like a lot of topics do, um, because it's a way to deflect as well, right? It's a way to bring attention away from what they're really doing or what they're really worried about, and make enemies. If you make enemies of immigration, if you make enemies of crazy environmentalists, then that's a common enemy you can unite people to hate, while you go ahead and do crazy things to gain more power and more wealth. That's a
Mhm.
simple way to see why they target these things. It's not really about the money. Um, yeah, I'm
No.
sure there's areas in every sector where there's waste. We know that. And I'm sure there's things that
Oh
can be
yeah.
improved in every sector. We also know that. But the way it's being handled is, it's insanity. I mean, it's absolute insanity. And yeah, I mean,
It's
I
so
think
unprofessional.
yeah, that's why I wanted to bring it up, is just because,
Mhm.
I think you made a really good point when you were talking too, is that it is affecting so much. I mean, it's affecting so much in the United States, but you mentioned, obviously, I'm Canadian, so I know how it's affecting my country. And I
Mhm.
know how it's affecting the other countries I work in as well. And I know how it's affecting everything. And you mentioned the economy and the stock market. I mean, that in some way, there's probably people out there who are thinking, well, at least people are losing money. The rich people are losing money. And I mean, I can see that sentiment. I can see it. However, keep in mind that when you think of that way, it is a bit short-sighted, because a lot of the people who are losing the money, some of them might be people who have too much money, but they're not even going to feel it. Like Musk isn't going to feel losing a couple billion because he's
No.
got so many more. But the people who might have been doing okay and might have had some retirement savings, who might have been the kind of people who would actually make donations to charities, the people who might have gone on ecotourism trips, the people who might come and volunteer with us here at Fauna Forever, those people now, if they lose that money because of Trump's actions, that actually, in a knockdown effect, often can have even more negative effects on conservation and the environment globally as well. It's a lot like the
Mhm.
sentiment that I remember hearing during the pandemic, when people said, oh, not traveling, so good for the environment. In the end, it was terrible. It destroyed so many conservation initiatives, so many areas that were protected, lost protection because there was no income. So people had to do things within their environment to cut trees down and hunt animals. In a net perspective, it was really bad. And having
Yeah.
the economy just crash worldwide, especially if it doesn't, unless it changes fundamentally at the end of this, which I don't think it's going to in the short term, it's just going to have a short term, really negative effect on everybody's lives, health, and even the environment. So, yeah, it's pretty hard to see any super positive things at the moment on this end, politically. But I guess, I just wanted to address it because it's interesting to see how it's affecting everybody. Obviously in the United States, people's lives are being ripped apart. The environment's at risk more than ever. But yeah, globally, it's an impact. And that
Mhm.
is without a doubt, when I have hope and positivity about conservation, the only thing that really pulls me away from that is politics and the state we're in right now in the world. So I would implore anybody out there to just try to, remain some positive, keep some positivity, but then also, when you get a chance to vote, when you get a chance to speak up, like, my God, we have to do something. I don't know how to do right now because we just had the election in the United States, but we have to try in the future. And I guess you've got, what, in less than 2 years, you've got at least some elections for Congress and Senate. So maybe there's some hope then. I don't know. It's a long time to wait, but yeah,
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know.
yeah,
I have thoughts, but that
yeah,
doesn't that, that doesn't need to be on here.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I think that you know I was talking to who was I talking to? But I was talking to someone and it was about, if you are stuck and you're feeling really depressed, there are so many groups and advocacy groups and people who are protesting all the time. So it's like getting involved in one thing
Mhm.
that, has been keeping me from absolutely spiraling down because I'm a woman in science in the United States, getting affected in many different ways, is keeping my community so close.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I've been really making an effort in, sharing my opinion, my side of, what accurate information is, trying to educate people who are just continuously sharing disinformation because they're so wrapped into Facebook or whatever news source, and we all know it's really easily disproved. But also it's just connecting with your community. And one thing that the Western, society really lacks is community, especially as
Mhm.
we become such a grind culture. um, it's like look at like my family in Europe, they're so community based, you see one another all the time. So if we can't do that because we're working all the time, how do we do that? Well, it's messaging, keeping in touch through whatever social media apps, staying off of your best to not doom scroll, but also going to events, going to protests, meeting new people, realizing you have many commonalities. That one thing, it's so easy to get bogged down because you realize, like, you think that it's just kind of happening to you because you're sitting here and you're like, man, this is horrible, I'm being so impacted, but everyone is. And so
Yeah.
when we get together and realize we're not alone, it makes us
Mhm.
stronger, because that's kind of what they want. They want to just bring us
Yeah.
down because then we're defeated, we're immobilized, and that's just not how we can live. We can't live that way. And
Yeah.
not saying that you shouldn't give yourself grace when you are feeling down, because absolutely you should, but it's also so important to be connecting to your community, to a healthy community, more than ever. And that also may mean distancing yourself from people who you do not find align with your values. And I mean, for myself, I've had to do that for my own sanity. As much as I love some of these people, I really do. I just find that there are moral differences that they may not see, and they believe it's based off of politics, but it's really morality. And to
Yeah.
me, I can't be close to someone who actively advocates against everything I do, I am, I believe in, and who I love. And so I can't. So, and that's okay. And it's just, you do what you have to do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really hard words, but really wise words. So thank you for sharing that, and I agree. Um,
mm,
well, I mean, that's quite a diverse 47 minutes there. We really spanned a
yeah.
lot of there. Um, I mean, I feel like maybe we should end the show on a story which is more up funny and has a kind of a zany aspect to it. To lighten the mood at the end here, not to ignore anything we said, which is so important, but it's always nice to sort of end it on something a little fun. So yeah, I'm going to share a story that happened in Uganda that is not actually, well, I was involved, but not not the stars of the story, shall we say. So two volunteers are the star, and a ranger are the star of this story. So we ran our final field site in uh, Kidepo, near Kidepo National Park, and we were doing bats. So that involved, again, going down late at night or in the afternoon. So we decided to go down. Most of the team went down around 5 o'clock to set up nets for bats. And we're down there setting up nets, and we had two radios, and we left one radio back at camp because a smaller group of people decided to stay and have dinner, and they were actually bringing dinner to us to eat in the field. Okay, so we're sitting there. It's about 6 o'clock, and we get a message on the radio from my friend Patty, and he's like, "There's an elephant coming. There's an elephant coming down your way. Keep an eye out. It's going in your direction." So we're all like, "Okay, what do we do?" So I'm like, "Okay, it's a big elephant. It's probably a male. You'd hear it crashing through if it's really coming. So just stay in areas that are visible. Watch vegetation. Don't panic. We're okay." So, anyways, sure enough, things happen, and they get here. The team. We didn't see the elephant. We don't know where it went, but it's okay. All good. Haha, nice, great. You saw an elephant. Cool, super fun, no problem. Okay, so the night starts, and we're have the radio spread out, and there's nets, and we're all checking and working. And then I get a message on the radio from, again, my co-coordinator Vonna, and she's like, "Does anyone hear that noise in the bush?" And we're like, "No." And then she's like, "There's an animal for sure." And then a couple minutes later, I get a message saying, Chris, there's a snake, come, 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 come. So I start running over, and sure enough, it's like a massive puff adder, and this is the first live puff adder I've seen. And so I'm like, this is super cool and like an amazing snake. Like, oh my God, I've
Yeah.
caught many, South American tropical vipers here, but this viper there is another. I could
Wow.
go on and on about the texture, the scales, the behavior, super cool. But anyway, so there's a puff adder. The thing is, I didn't have the bagger to catch it because, to be honest, I was focused on bats, not herps. So I said, well, I really would like to catch it so I can identify the sex and I can also teach people how to do it properly, but I don't have the equipment. So we have a volunteer, Jan, one of the legendary Jan. If you knew him, you'd love him. We all do. And he's, of course, I even said, if someone could go and get it, and I looked at Jan and he's like, me? I'm like, well, he's like, I will. I'm like, okay, thanks, Jan. So Jan just runs 3 kilometers up a hill because this is Jan. And I'm sitting there the whole time with like a piece of wood, just keeping this puff adder calm in the middle of like a field. I had to like hook and tail it over to an area that was open, and then I just put it down, and then it's just moving, and I'm just keeping it calm. So I'm waiting about a half an hour. Other people are doing bats. I'm there with 2 people keeping the puff adder calm. And then about, I don't know, it's been about a half an hour. And suddenly, out of the blue, we just hear a gunshot. Boom. And we're like, what the hell? And then like 10, 15 seconds later, boom, another gunshot. And we're like, okay, so obviously something's happening. Maybe it's an elephant they're scaring. I don't know what's happening. And by the way, key feature I didn't mention, we would always have 2 rangers with us from the local government to help protect us from wildlife and potential, invaders, like I said. So I knew it was a ranger firing the gun. I thought it was about an elephant. That's all we thought. We're like, okay, stay calm. We're good. And then finally, 30 seconds goes off and there's a third gunshot. And this time you just hear this just like rumbling noise. And it's like, okay, that is not elephant. That must be something else. And the only thing in the area would be buffalo. So there is a huge herd of buffalo rumbling. And after this third gunshot, and we're like, okay, well, we're in a valley. They're not coming toward us. We're okay. And we're all thinking like, I hope Jan is okay. And then sure enough, I get a phone call because there's actually signal there. And I get a phone call, and it's actually from our other volunteer, Tom. His phone calls me. And I'm like, Tom, what the hell? Aren't you having dinner, Tom? And I say, hello? And it's Jan. And he's like, hello. I just wanted to let you know that we are currently in a tree right now, but we're all okay, but we're currently in a tree. And
Oh my
I was like,
gosh.
okay, well, that's good to know. And how are you doing? He's like, that's fine. I think they're leaving, so we'll come as soon as we can. And he's very calm. I'm like, okay, well, the snake's here. Stay safe. We'll see you soon. But anyways, yeah, 10 minutes goes by and they come on down. And Jan's there with Tom, who had decided to come randomly, like good timing. And
Yeah.
and this ranger who we ended up just naming like Ranger Dennis. Like his name was Dennis, but this guy, I think he really probably likes like Rambo and Chuck Norris movies. Like he really likes the idea that I'm a ranger and I run it and I have the gun and everything. He's just really so
Yeah.
apparently he fired the gun when the buffalo were not even like doing anything. He just like panicked. And by the way, he didn't hurt them. Just saying it was one. He doesn't kill
Yeah.
anyone,
I
but
just
they
no.
fire it in the air to scare it. But even like why did he do it? They weren't stampeding, and he fires the gun, and then they stampede. And then the best part is like Jan is like he's crazy. He just climbs right up the tree because it's Jan. But then Tom, the other volunteer, I'm not throwing him under the bus, but it's hard to climb a tree in the savannah. So Tom's like slipping and trying to get up, and the ranger tries one time to help him, and then he's like, screw you. He gets up to the tree himself. So then Tom's in the ground, and finally the ranger's like, I guess I should help you up. So poor Tom was just like
Poor
could have been just killed
Tom.
by a buffalo. Yeah. So,
Oh
anyways,
my God.
they're fine. And to be honest with you, I'm super jealous of the story. And they even said they're like, now that we're fine, this was the best moment of the whole trip. It was so cool, like
That's
scary as
so,
hell, but also such a great story, right?
yeah,
Um,
right.
so
Oh
yeah,
my
that
gosh.
was that, and we caught the snake. It was fine. Got to
Yeah.
sex it and show everybody. It was a beautiful male. And yeah, we had like 35 bats that night. We didn't get back till like 1 a.m. Just a crazy, crazy, crazy night. But yeah, I will never really forget the moment I got a phone call from Tom's cell phone and Jan on the other side saying, "By the way, I'm in a tree." I'm like, okay, well, good for you. Yeah. So
Okay.
um, that
So fun. Oh my gosh. I
yeah.
love it.
Yeah,
Oh
so
yeah.
that's my not my field story, but that was the best field story of the trip for sure.
Yeah,
So um,
yeah. I love
yeah,
that. Thank you
yeah.
for sharing that.
So
Was the ranger kind of young? I would call him tough.
it was like mid later 20s, you know. But
Okay, he's
he
young.
we had constant we had constant, I don't know how to put it, like I don't want to say issues, but he became kind of a camp joke because the others were all like very calm and very, you know, professional, and this
Hmm.
particular one, he was just always late to show up for work. He was always telling us where to go, and I'm like, I know where I'm going, why, you know, he's always like over there. I'm like, I know, I'm going
Gen Z.
there. Yeah, just it was really funny. It was just became like a, you know, we
Yeah.
would sometimes leave for birds and he's supposed to be there on time, and we're like, well, all right, good thing we have Ranger Dennis. We feel safe now, and he's just sleeping still, you know. It's just, yeah, it was hilarious. But
Oh, that's
oh well,
awesome.
it was fun though. So yeah, just
Yeah,
one of the highlights of the trip. So
that was fantastic.
well,
Oh my God, poor Tom.
yeah, yeah. No, he's fine. It's a good story now. Yeah, and he
Mhm.
was great. Tom was amazing. Jan, I mean, again, great people. So I'm glad we didn't lose them. It was good. Yeah. So yeah, so that's a heck of an episode. I mean, we covered a lot of ground and a lot of
Yeah.
things, both really cool, not cool, inspiring, depressing, funny, a lot of emotions, a lot of ups and downs. But I really enjoyed that episode. That was fun. It
Yeah.
was great to catch up about that.
I
And
know. It was really good stuff. Did you get any
yeah,
tattoo?
which this one? This
Yeah,
one?
I can't
No,
remember
no,
if I.
I've had this one for years. This is my first one. This is the Phrygianus hawk that I trained for 18 years. So yeah, that's her.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that's
I
her.
know that the arm one's a little new, but I just don't. I guess I couldn't remember. Maybe wear longer
Yeah,
sleeves or
I
something.
guess. Yeah, no, I got to get more. I said I still don't have the time. I don't have the time, but
Hmm.
I need to get more eventually for sure. So yeah,
Same. I feel you.
yeah.
All right.
Well, all right. I guess we'll wrap it up there. We'll save an hour long of tattoo talk because I could probably talk about all the ones I want, and so could you. So we'll save that. We'll save the listeners from that. And yeah, it was great catching up. I mean, my schedule is crazy now, so I got an expedition going to Manu next week, and then a whole visit from Wilderness International coming here in Peru. And so I don't know when I'll be able to get on an episode next. Probably in a couple weeks, but you know, maybe you or maybe Nick might be able to do an episode. We'll see. But either way, I hope everybody, you know, enjoyed this episode, enjoyed the catch up. And yeah, I don't know exactly when I'll be on again, probably in a couple of weeks, but it was great seeing you again, Michela, and chatting with you and catching up. And yeah, everybody just try to stay strong. I know it's really hard times right now. But there is hope, you know, there's hope out there. And I really do think one day we'll pull through this dark time, even though it is pretty rough some days. So everybody just try to stay strong, even though it's hard. And you're right, what you said, Michela, communicate, look for support, find your community. Super,
Hmm.
super powerful words that you said. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Stay strong, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Okay, ciao.